another episode of the A Life Well Lived, a Physician's Guide to Wealth podcast. We have a lucky, awesome guest. I'm lucky that she's here. Awesome guest, Asia Evans, who's a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in financial therapy. And pulling a quote directly from her website that, she said, as a licensed therapist, I've seen firsthand the benefit greater financial education, resources, and planning have on someone's mental well-being. And Asia also has a partnership with Laurel Road and helps a lot of physicians, which is another reason why we are here today and collabing. I sent Asia an email, I don't know, a month or two ago, just stumbled across her website doing some research, and I honestly wasn't sure if she'd respond, and she said, "Hey, let's talk."
Yeah.
So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. This will be fun.
Yeah. Thanks, James, for having me. I'm happy you stumbled across my website and into my email because this is something I'm so passionate about talking about and love to connect with other people who are going through it or talking about it or helping. So this is great. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think, the main purpose with us being on this mission right now, especially like in the, younger physician space, or maybe even like starting in med school and residency, but then also, working with physicians in their first 5 or 10 years is kind of that, how can we help physicians cancel burnout, start living their life simply by taking control of their money? And that's obviously what we do. And I know in past conversations with you get, even like a level deeper probably than we do, is like understanding past experiences with money, understanding emotions and money, which we do some of, but based on our last conversation, I was like, okay, she's another level. But I would just say that, the 3 or 4 most common challenges that we see, younger doctors have, or just doctors in general with their money, is there's a lot of frustration after receiving little to no money education in med school and training. Also, you and me in undergrad or high school, there really wasn't much money education. So there really isn't a lot out there for anybody. There's a lot of, societal pressures and expectations towards physicians. I always tell like a funny story of a friend of mine who used to live in our building, who's a resident. She found out that she was getting overcharged for her pedicures when they found out that she was a doctor. So yeah, so she shared that to me. That's always, something, interesting. There's a lot of rules of thumb out there as well. Like, I feel like if I asked any doctor, friend, or client about like, hey, I, have this weird pain, the first thing they would tell me not to do is go into Google and look it up, because it would probably come up with something pretty terrifying. And I feel like a lot of that relates to money and wealth. Like if you Google something, there's going to be a lot of different rules of thumb and opinions, and not that any of that's bad. And then a lot of, I would say as well, which is why you and I are here today, is a lot of physicians, or just people in general, are unsure where to start learning and take the right steps in the right direction as it relates to their money and everything else. So would you say, is that similar to things that you see, or is there anything that you would add to that list?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that's a pretty comprehensive list about what people are going through and what young doctors or med students are going through and trying to just figure it out. I definitely agree with financial education and how it's really difficult for people to kind of figure out that they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you learn the things that you don't know, and where do you go? Because the amount of people talking about finances and talking about financial education on social media is fantastic. I love to see it. However, you want to make sure that you're coming to credible sources who do know what they're talking about. This isn't just kind of something that they saw in passing on a different social media post. So making sure that you go to your financial professionals for just kind of their take on where you can gain a little bit more financial education. I do think social media can be a great place because it is easy, digestible, small bits of information that aren't overwhelming. I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by books that can be a little bit more heavy in the numbers, and sometimes you just need to kind of take it a little slow. So I think education is a huge part of it. So that's just massively important. But to your point, and why I'm also here in the work that I do, is understanding where your emotions are coming from, right? Like understanding where some of your behaviors come from. And that might be from your family, it might be from the way you were raised, and understanding how the culture of society is now going to interact with you when you're a doctor, to the point of the example you gave of
Hmm.
a woman who was being overcharged because they heard that she was a doctor, right? Like sometimes people are going to respond to you differently, or expect that you are in a different financial situation than you might currently be in. So how do you prepare for that? And then how do you combat that with education and support and behaviors that are going to help you reach your financial goals?
Yeah, yeah, it's really, even just there's so many different variables involved, like you said, like going back to our roots. It's like so much was probably imprinted on us from our childhoods, and how we view money, and how one person grew up can certainly be a lot different, as we all know, than a different individual. And I'm sure, and you probably know better than me, or maybe you could speak more on it, just like how we were raised can really affect how we perceive money, because there's really no like education in K through 12, high school, college, med school, real world. It's like the one thing that's constant in all of our lives, but there's not like, a ton of education, or we don't help each other
Yeah.
out. It's kind of how I always
Yeah.
look at it.
It's not as formalized as it might need to be, considering
Sure.
that we all need to navigate money in some way, shape, or form. So the thing about money is that, like many things with psychology, you you witness the modeling of money through whoever you're closest to. So when you're a kid, if that's your parents who raised you, or a caregiver, or somebody in your life who you were around, how they talk about money is going to impact how you think about money. Their beliefs about money are going to impact your beliefs about money. The narrative, even though your financial place in the world might change, those narratives don't necessarily change unless you recognize that they need to change. So that means that if you saw a grandmother um, spending a lot of money because that's what made her feel good, you too might think that, oh, the only way for me to feel good is to spend a
Mm,
lot of money.
deep.
Or right, like you don't, it's so subtle that you don't
Hmm.
always recognize that this is what's going on, or recognize where it came from, because that's just the way things were. Or if you hear one of your parents consistently saying like, oh, we don't have the money, oh, we don't have the money, oh, we don't have the money, and then the child goes to somebody else and it's like, oh no, we don't have money, right? That has a larger impact coming from a kid than it may have from a parent to a kid. And not understanding the nuances of it as a child stays with you until you're an adult. So that can impact your behaviors too. So it's really important to start thinking about, what are the narratives that I have been told and that I believe about money? How does that show up for me in my own behavior when
Hmm.
I am out with friends, or grocery shopping, or spending money, or coming into contact with any of my financial behaviors? What comes up, and where did that come from? And a lot of times the deep, deep, deep roots are coming from your childhood.
Yeah, and if you are like listening right now, which you are if you're here, that might be an awesome time to click the pause button and write down some of the that's something I am going to do when I go back through and edit this, is hit that pause button and go through some of the questions you just asked, and pose them on myself, because I have, but it's always something that can, new things can always rise up to the surface, right? Over time.
Always.
Are there any other I guess good questions, or I'm sure it's beyond the scope of a podcast. It probably require like your services, which we can get to later. But any other good ways to kind of just reflect on how one's childhood shaped their money behavior as it relates to their
Mhm.
emotions?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely say looking at your narratives first is a big one. And I also will just caution people that you might reveal things that you are not anticipating. So, this needs to be very gentle work. when you're doing it. And that's why, sometimes it's encouraged that you see a therapist when you're doing it, financial therapist specifically, if you're talking about your money narratives, and really just looking at like, why do I do the things that I do with money?
Mhm.
Where is that coming from? What is the feeling that I have underneath it that I am either trying to hide, trying to change, trying to compensate for? Getting in touch with your feeling and your behavior. And
Mhm.
if they're not related, that's okay. But just taking the time to start recognizing what's going on with your feelings and some of your money behaviors can be a step in the direction towards like, hey, is this really working for me? Is this healthy for me? Am I reaching my financial goals? Do I feel good doing this? So looking at your narratives and then starting to ask yourself, what are the feelings and how do they connect to behaviors?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, like mic drop, right? You were saying all that, it just had,
Yeah.
had me just thinking about like I was over here, like I don't even know what to say next, other than just thinking about like myself and my own, even like me being a financial planner for a living, like I need to have a reality check with myself all the. It's just like a constant, never-ending
Yes.
growth journey.
Right. And that's all of us too, right? Like
Yeah.
I am a financial therapist and I do this work, but that doesn't mean that sometimes I'm not like, hey, I just want to go buy this because I just want to buy it. And really, if I take the time, it's, oh, I want to buy that because I was feeling overwhelmed, or I was feeling bad about myself, or I was excited and I wanted to celebrate. So I wanted to buy something. And all of these things are okay, but doing it mindlessly, I think, is where we can get ourselves into trouble
Hmm.
versus like, oh no, I'm really proud of myself for that accomplishment. And this is something I've been thinking about and I've wanted for a while and I've slept on it or didn't get it for months. And now this is going to be something that I work towards as a celebration. So I'm going to get it for myself. But
Yeah.
I think that the mindless spending without recognizing that it might be coming from an emotion as a way of coping with something is where we all can get into quick trouble.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and that just made me think too. I feel like kind of that like delayed gratification for physicians because there's so much brute force effort that goes into med school and then training, and they're kind of, I would say, sacrificing almost 10 years of their life while
Mhm.
most of their peers started work at 22, right out of college. They're traveling, they're getting married, they're buying houses and all the different things. And I feel like, it probably can cause, which I've heard you say in a different podcast, some physicians, right when they get that first big paycheck as an attending, to YOLO their way to happiness.
Mhm.
I had to drop that in this one just because I heard you say it in a different podcast. But yeah, so I'm sure. And then, like you said, it could be like, where we can all get into trouble and like be a slippery slope. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because we all need to, remain in the present and live our lives in the present. But at the same time, I imagine kind of what you're getting at is understanding the reasons and the behaviors underneath the surface that's causing the actions.
Right. And that is true, right? Like doctors work incredibly hard to get through school and get through residency and potentially get through fellowship and training and a lot of sleepless nights, I'm sure, and missing of life events and not just the bigger things, right? If you see people getting married or buying homes or whatnot. But I'm just talking about like, hey, a lot of my friends went to happy hour and I wanted to go, but I had to
Mm,
study, or I had to work a long shift and I missed something that I really wanted to go to, or I couldn't travel because I had to work, or I had to, write things and study and research and make sure you're committing to memory and learning. So there's so much that people, doctors specifically, have to give up to get to the point in their occupation where they can then enjoy all of the things that we're mentioning.
yeah.
So yeah, like when you get to be an attendee and you are, wanting to splurge on those shoes or to splurge on a fancy dinner, I get it and you should.
Definitely.
Please do, right? Like this is very normal human behavior to and human like money behavior. A lot of times if you have a lot of money suddenly, there is a desire to spend it quickly, but that eventually will taper down. That behavior will taper out and kind of neutralize, and that's okay to enjoy it in the beginning. We just want to make sure that you are not blowing through your money and not doing the right things that are going to kind of set you up longer term. So yes, please enjoy your money when you start getting those beautiful paychecks. That's fantastic. You worked hard, you earned it, but make sure that you're also setting yourself up for future success financially as well.
hmm hmm And I think this is a perfect segue into something that you really enjoy talking about, self-esteem and money. And I think it'd be kind of fun to maybe unpack it a little bit for like the new attending physician who all of a sudden goes from, their first paycheck might be a third of what they made in the previous year in training or in
Mhm.
residency. And I also know just from talking to physicians, and I've experienced it myself, there's a lot of imposter syndrome around
Mhm.
not only just money, but like earning a reputation as a physician, because now you're
Yeah.
the one that all the residents look up to.
Mhm.
And so I think it'd be kind of fun to hear what you have to just say about, self-esteem and money, or if you have anything to add or speak on in regards to that.
Yeah, well, I think what comes up for a lot of people is that they don't recognize that they are trying to fill up their cup, if you will, or fill themselves up or make themselves feel better by spending. So
Mhm.
if you are dealing with, and I love that you brought up imposter syndrome, but if you are dealing with imposter syndrome about now being a bigger fish in a small pond or a bigger fish in a very big pond, but you're not the small fish anymore, there
Mhm.
might feel like there's this pressure for you to be seen as this doctor, right? So, does that impact what kind of car you drive? Oh, I'm going to feel really good if I'm showing up in this fill in the blank. Right?
It always
Or,
sounds kind of nice. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
and it does. And, it feels nice too. And I get it. But recognizing
Mhm.
why, I think, is the biggest point. Are you feeling bad and are now trying to compensate for feeling bad by driving a different kind of car? Now, this is not to say that everybody who is driving a nice car is walking around with low self esteem. Not at all. That is not what I'm saying. But I want to make sure people are recognizing why they are buying the things that they're buying. Are you buying that Louboutin purse because you've decided this is what a doctor should look like? I should be quote unquote fancy. I should have the finest things. I should be wearing designer. Why? Right? Like if it
Mhm.
doesn't tickle your fancy and if you're not really into it, then it shouldn't be something that you're buying. You should be buying and spending your money on things that make you feel good, but knowing why you're doing that. So when I bring up self-esteem and money, a lot of times people are spending money because they think it's going to make them feel better. They think it's
Mhm.
going to make them be seen by other people in a different way. And it might feel a little bit better at first, right? There is that dopamine rush when you make the purchase, but eventually that tapers down and you aren't shifting how you actually see yourself. You're not shifting your self esteem. You are just kind
Mhm.
of putting like a small band aid on it that will fall off and you'll need to, do something else with it again. So recognizing why you're making purchases, is it because you think it's going to be perceived by other people in a better way or that they'll think of you differently? It really is about how you think about yourself and how do you dive into that outside of purchasing. And I will say, like, spending is equally as important as learning how to save, right? Learning to spend and learning to save are two important things. I don't want somebody who is saying that they never enjoy their money, that they never spend their money, because that's as much of a problem as not saving enough too.
Mhm. Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, and in one of my in some of my research, I stumbled across like a 13th century definition of wealth. And it's very different than wealth, I would say, in today's world. And it talks about, happiness and prosperity and abundance. It
Mm-hmm.
says an
Mm-hmm.
analogy of health. And then it talks about health, well-being, and kind of some of those like core human needs of like safety, security, freedom, maybe even status as well, like as it relates to
Yeah.
wealth. And I would say that really differs from maybe in today's Instagram keeping up with the Joneses economy definition of
Right.
wealth. So it kind of was going to lead me to my next question of like, of course, we all want nice, nice things. There's nothing wrong with that. And I know you weren't saying that there was, but I guess relating to self-esteem and money, like, do you have anything to add or say about, I guess, how one can kind of get that happiness or meet some of those core human needs of safety and security and, all the different things as it relates to how they, spend money, save money, whatever it might be?
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about your emotions, right? So being aware of what's going on for you internally and emotionally when you are spending your money. So one beautiful example is like having a no spend time period, right? It could be a no spend week, it could be a no spend month. And it could be like obviously pay your bills, right? Make sure that you
Yeah.
have food in your house and that you can eat and that all your basic needs are met, of course. But when you are kind of quote unquote forcing yourself to not spend money, it allows you to start paying attention to when and why you want to spend money. So is
Interesting.
it right? And I
Yeah,
literally just did this
this
a
is
week ago.
good.
A week ago, I was like, okay, Asia, no spending. You're just not going to spend the week. Let's figure out when you want to spend money. And the times that I wanted to spend money were I didn't feel like cooking or was thinking about dinner. So I wanted to spend money for convenience, right? Like,
Mhm.
please, somebody else make my dinner and I'll go pick it up. So convenience or something was going on for me emotionally. I had a hard day or I was overwhelmed and I wanted to go spend to help myself feel better. And I think recognizing when you want to do that then clues you into how you start spending your money and why you're spending your money that way. So paying attention to how you're spending your money, and then you can think about, and it will take practice. This is not going to happen the first time you do it, right? Thinking about what is happening and what are the narratives and what are some of the messages you're giving yourself. So having that conversation about your negative self-talk and what it's saying to you and how do you stop some of those negative messages that you're giving to yourself, right? To then look inside and say, oh no, I am worthy, I am enough, I am deserving. I bring other things to the table outside of being a therapist, outside of being a doctor, outside of being a parent, outside of being um, add your title, whatever it is. And I say all those different things because that is the holistic approach that it sounds like the old version of wealth is, right? You are a whole
Mhm.
human, and these things that you do and that you contribute add value, but all of them combine to create who you are. It's all a mixture, not just one thing. And when you think about that and allow that to blossom and you feed that, then you find value in yourself. And
Yeah.
that's where self-esteem is going to come from. That's where self-esteem is going to blossom from. Being a doctor is amazing and it's an amazing occupation and work that you can do, but you also need to make sure that you know who you are outside of work because you do add value outside of work and your work can be valuable and it is, but if we are generating self-esteem and we are helping push forward lower self-esteem, you have to be able to find value in just being, not only adding value to other people's lives. So
Mhm.
it can get
Mhm.
really complex and really deep, as you can imagine, but making sure that you are just taking the time to think to yourself, oh, like I I'm a good person, not just because I do this as an occupation, but because I show up for my friends or I like to help my family or I'm present in my community in some way that feels important.
Mhm. Yeah, that's all like really, really good point. And my business partner founded I Am Wealth. Him and I, we have this conversation all the time because we both played college football,
Mhm.
and a lot of players that we played with, their identity kind of got wrapped in it because you grow up with it, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden, like, all one day, it's literally just gone. And
Yes.
And we talk about it too, like with what we do as financial planners, like, all right, so like what happens if this just like some rule change happens and we're just, irrelevant? Like, so it's like we constantly try to bring it up to, each other. And Jeff and I were talking a couple weeks ago. He was up visiting me up here in Traverse City for our, we do like a team quarterly power huddle. And his fiance is in medical school right now. And he was just talking about, because him and I have these conversations that you and I are having right now all the time about how he's overheard meetings that she's been in on Zoom, and how it's kind of just programmed from med school, like the seed is planted that like you're a physician and that comes first and nothing else in life matters. Not, I might be being a little bit dramatic, right? But it sounds like it's very, very common, and I can understand why it would be that way. And I personally have forced myself. Have you heard of the Wheel of Life? It's like an assessment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I stumbled across it, just like a goal planning journal that I use. And it's something that I do every quarter just to like assess. And there's, every time I go through it, there's always like a blind spot. Like, oh, I really, went hard in work last quarter, but like probably wasn't as good of like, calling my family members as I should have been.
Right.
Like little things like that. So anyways, I don't even know how I just got to talking about that, but I feel like it's something relating to
Well, just being holistic in your approach to humans, right?
Yeah,
And recognizing that all of our identity can't be wrapped up in one thing that we're doing. And again, being a physician is definitely part of your identity. It's an amazing part of your identity. But if you feel like you don't know who you are outside of being a physician, that is going to be really difficult on your self-esteem. If, right, like you said, you're not a physician. And I love that example you gave about being an athlete. I was also a college athlete. And what happens when this is your whole life? And then senior year comes and it's your last game. And after that, it's done. Like, right? Your career as this type of athlete, unless you're doing something else in the same field, but it is over. At least mine was like after my senior year, right? Like I had my last game and that was it. And that was the period to a very long time as an athlete in that way. So you're right. Like if it is everything that you're doing, two-a-days and practices and games and people approaching you because you are a part of this team, right? Like once that ends, if that's your whole identity, that's very difficult for somebody to just like, oh my goodness, who am I outside of this?
It's a weird feeling.
Yes. Yeah. What are my goals? What am I doing? Right? Like, yeah.
What is my purpose? Which is a very deep question, right?
Yeah.
I didn't, also side note, I didn't know you were a college athlete. What sport?
I was a cheerleader.
Okay.
I was a collegiate cheerleader. Yeah. And competitive cheerleading is wild and amazing. But it's hard to say goodbye to when, like you said, to your point, like you were doing it for so long. Like I think I started cheering. I think I was less than 10.
Yeah.
So like it's over a decade.
I know for me, football, I think was like second grade. Like that's a
Right?
long time. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I know something else that you really enjoy talking about are the three components of financial wellness. For we could gear it towards obviously like a physician, whether it's med student, resident, or maybe attending in their first 5 or 10 years. But let's unpack that a little bit. I'll let you jump in and do your thing if you'd like.
Yeah. So the way I look at financial wellness, right, is holistically. So I'm so happy that we're talking about that. But it really is about understanding yourself, understanding money or your money, and then having a plan or making a plan of action. And we've talked about components of it, right? Actually, I think we've talked about all of them. So understanding yourself when you're talking about, hey, why am I spending? What are my behaviors? What are my narratives? What's going on for me? And then looking at understanding money, and that is about financial education. And do I have a high yield savings account? And where is my retirement? And I do have a planner, and what are we doing? And what are my financial goals? So understanding yourself, understanding your money. And then the last one is having a plan, right? And literally having a financial planner is about having a plan and having your financial goals set in place so that you can work the plan to make sure that your whole life and is attended to with your money, right? So when I'm talking about financial wellness, I want you as a person to have a decent relationship with money. I want you to understand your money. And then with those two components, having a plan so that you feel like you're moving towards where you want to go in your financial life. And I think the idea of having this like perfect financial plan is so nice, but because we're humans, we need to leave room to make mistakes. And it's okay if you went over your budget at some point, as long as you're
Right.
able to like get back on track. Or it's all right if you're like, oh my God, I hate budgeting. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm bad at math. I am bad at these things. That's okay. But let's make sure that let's learn about it, right? Like, let's start understanding money, or how can you get some support or some help to start feeling better about your relationship with money and feeling better about the goals that you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, those are my three components that I think we have done a beautiful job of already touching on.
I wasn't exactly sure what they were. And then I asked, you're like, wait, I think we talked about all those. So
Yeah,
that's
we did.
perfect. Yeah, and I feel like too, just with the lack of education around money, everybody gets so caught up like in the numbers and the investments and like all the sexy stuff like crypto or whatever it is, versus like a lot of what you're doing in your mission is like understanding those behaviors and then creating a plan. And it's never going to be a perfect plan. It's never going to be get the best returns in the world or whatever. It's just like
Right.
system. I would imagine kind of like what you mean is like systematic behavior and, changing and modifying and adapting over a period of time.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and especially for what we're talking about, right? So a med student's plan and your needs are not going to be the same as somebody who is a resident or somebody who is an attending, right? Like, that's going to look very different as your life progresses. And that's okay, but that just means that you have grown and your life has shifted and you might have to change your plan, and that's okay. And I think it's important for people to recognize that, right? Like, my plan when I was 20 should definitely look very different than it looks right now. Or what does your plan look like if you're single? Or what are your financial goals? Or what does the plan look like if you have kids or have to move closer to your parents, right? So all of these things are going to impact what your plan looks like. And it's okay that it changes. It's not find one, stick to it forever, because, life comes at you quickly. And look at us right now, right? Like, March 2020 happened and everything shifted how we do things. And
We
yeah, we
we'd
probably,
I don't know if we ever would have connected or be doing this. I barely even use Zoom.
right. Now it's a regular thing, and we can have these connections from places that are different, right? Or just reaching out to people and see them and feel that connection, because that's what we want as humans. We want to have a level of togetherness and have a level of connection that we may not feel all the time. So yeah, we have to be able to be a little bit flexible to shift with things.
Yep. Have to change and adapt and adjust. Have we already talked about honesty with yourself relating to money? Would you say? Because I know that's another one of your favorite topics. I mean, I will say, of course, Asia and I collabed before this, and she gave me some of her faves. So gotta shout those out first.
Definitely, and touch on them. I feel like the honesty with yourself is definitely going to come in when you are trying to take the time to ask yourself some of those harder questions. So earlier when we were saying that, why am I doing this? Or what are the narratives that I heard? Or what are the beliefs that I had growing up? And how did they continue in your life? That's when the honesty with yourself is going to be really important. Or when we started talking about self-esteem, that is going to be hard. It's not easy to say, you know what, I don't feel great about myself. That's really, really hard to say. And that's where the honesty about
Mhm.
yourself and about your money is going to come in. So I gave the example about buying the car. That requires a level of honesty. If you're going to get down to, hey, am I buying this car for other people or am I buying it for me? And if I
Right.
am buying it for other people, why? Like, why is that important to me? And what am I trying to say to them or to
Mhm.
myself? And that is a level of honesty that can be very difficult.
Big
So
time.
that's right. So that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about being honest with yourself, really, really thinking about why you're doing the things you're doing with money and be honest about what's coming up for you when you're doing them.
Mhm.
And I use myself as an example all the time. When I first moved to New York City, I I just thought it was so great to be in New York City and I thought it was so cool and it was, but I was also spending a ton of money to do what I thought was like cool. And I use
Uh-huh.
air quotes because what is cool, and it looks very different for me now in my mid to late 30s than it looked for me when I was 24. But
Uh-huh.
it what to me at the time it was like I have good looking clothes and I am going to brunch with my friends and having nights out, and it was awesome and I had a blast, but financially I could not afford to keep up with that type of lifestyle the way and the frequency in which I was doing it. um
Mhm.
but my self-esteem told me I needed to. My self-esteem said, oh no, Asia, if you're going to be in New York City, you need to be doing this stuff.
Right.
And I didn't, but I wasn't ready to be honest with myself about the fact that I couldn't afford to go to brunch and then go shopping and then go out to dinner and, order out and travel all at the same time. I was trying to do too much, trying to do
Uh-huh.
too much.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because we know how shopping goes after brunch.
Oh my God, not good, right?
A
Like you
couple
have a few
mimosas.
mimosas.
Yeah. Same page.
Exactly. You have a couple mimosas and you're like, wow, these pants look great. And then, tomorrow you might not
Been
love them
there.
as much.
Wa- For you, was there like a specific like turning moment or turning point where like you were like the aware it just kind of hit you or you became aware like, I need to change or like kind of be more honest with myself?
Yeah. So I was at Easter dinner with a cousin and he had just, I don't know how money came up or personal finance, but he was really into it and had been reading a ton and just was like very present in the like personal finance space.
Mhm.
And I was talking to him, I was like, I'm making more money than I ever have before, but I don't feel like I'm getting ahead. I don't feel like I'm should where I need to be for savings or in my debt. And I don't feel good. Like I feel overwhelmed. I'm having fun, but it's mostly to mask that I feel bad.
Right.
Um, or escape it. And he just gave me a few resources and was like, hey, like start like learning about it and start just like reading, and gave me a couple books of names of books to just start with. And I listened to him and I could not stop. And from then on, that's actually like what changed my trajectory in
Huh.
mental health and in personal finance and financial therapy. I I started learning about it and I was like, oh my God, this debt, Asia, absolutely not. This credit card, and you are paying a car payment and you're paying New York City rent. No wonder why you feel bad. And I just started paying attention. So
Sure.
that was, I didn't realize at the time, but that started my financial journey, but also shifted my career too, because then I could listen for when other people were feeling upset about their money or feeling stressed or feeling anxious, and create space for that and allow them to start learning to be honest with themselves about why they were spending the way they were spending or why they felt bad, and just give room to that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like awareness is so like huge for really like any area of life, whether it be money or just like mental health, like knowing and understanding why you are the way you I don't know, it's really it's almost it's hard to like put into words unless you actually spend the time pausing this video, reflecting on Asia's questions
Right.
and like really doing some deep introspection with yourself, which most people have a hard time with. But I imagine if, you know, if you're here, you'll be open to doing it. So I would encourage anybody, if you aren't a writer, maybe you could type it or draw, I don't know, talk to a friend about it, or, you know, whatever it might be. But there's been many times for me over the years where I've just had to get like, ask myself hard questions and then get
Yeah.
it on paper to be able to, you know, continue to grow. And it's a never ending growth, but that awareness and then I guess doing is something about it, you know, typically leads to change and confidence and, you know, everything it might be.
Definitely. And you just feel so much better, right?
Yeah.
It's similar to therapy. I always use the analogy of cleaning out your closet, right? If you're in a clean room and you empty out the closet because you're going to clean it out, the room is messy and that feels uncomfortable and that is your discomfort. But eventually, once you sift through everything and you start learning about what was in your closet, you can put it away or donate some things or toss some things. It gets less messy and then you feel better. So
Hmm.
it's hard at first, and kudos to everybody doing this work, right? Including you,
Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's worth it for what comes out on the other end and where you're at then.
Hmm. And always got to go back to the closet every so often
Always.
through the process again and again and
Yeah.
again and again.
Yep. Totally. Totally.
Uh-huh. So a little bit of a topic change, just, you know, given that we're talking about physicians, you know, student loans always comes into play. I know you have a, you know, partnership with Laurel Road. I know student loans can feel almost like, I don't know, very overwhelming, crushing. Like I have some business debt, but it's not, you know, anywhere near like, you know, what the average physician is walking out of med school with. And I
Mhm.
just know in a lot of conversations how overwhelming it can, you know, it can feel. So I always like to, and I don't know if you view it this way, I always like to kind of flip the script of like, you know, your student loans are just an investment into yourself. You know, you
Mhm.
invested 200,000 into yourself. That's going to get you to a position where you can then go on and hopefully, you know, earn six figures for the next, you know, 30 or 40 years, which far surpasses that 200,000. But I guess, do you have any, we don't have to get the like tips to pay off loans or anything like that, because, you know, you're all behavioral and emotional, and I love attacking the behavior and the emotion. So I guess what advice would you give to a physician who might be overwhelmed by, you know, by their student debt?
Yeah, I mean, I love your strength-based reframe, right? So
Hmm.
recognizing that for a lot of people, they wouldn't be able to be a physician without their student loans. Um, and it's great for the people who could, but a lot of people can't. And it is a lot of money to invest, but to your point, you are investing it in yourself, and you might not be able to be a doctor without it. And I think that's really
Right.
important. And then I also think that taking a breath and recognizing you do not have to pay your student loans back tomorrow, right? I think
Right.
when people get overwhelmed, it's because they're thinking like this needs to be gone tomorrow. And I understand, right? Like you want to offload that debt as soon as humanly possible. And you can do, some people can do it very quickly, and that's amazing and good for them. But for other people, they have other things going on that make it a little bit more difficult or takes a little bit longer for them to um, pay down that debt completely. So recognizing that if you have a plan and you are working your plan, you will eventually pay off your student loans.
Yeah.
And it can happen. I think you can see these huge amounts. You're like, I'm never going to pay this off, or my $1,000+ a month that I'm sending to my student loans is not even putting a dent in how big the loan is. Baby steps, right? It
Hmm.
will happen if you have a plan and you're working your plan, trust your plan, you will get there. But you have to breathe through thinking that you have to pay off all of your debt the next day.
Right. Right. Patience and persistence.
Mhm.
Things I have to tell myself every day.
Yeah, definitely.
And I, you know, I feel a lot of it too might once again kind of like how we were raised. Like, you know, if a someone had a grandmother who lived through the Great Recession and it was passed down that debt, or Great Depression, not recession, that debt is evil, debt is bad, and then maybe there's pressure from parents or
Yes.
friends that like, oh, you have to pay off your debt in 5 years because interest is terrible, or
Right.
whatever it might be. But I'd say a lot of the conversations that we have with physicians, it's I've already sacrificed 10 years of my life
Mhm.
plus. I don't want to be like beholden to my loans and not live my life to try to get them paid off in like 2-3 years. So I've also heard you mention balance in different podcasts. So I kind of feel like it's like a having a plan and being able to, balance all of it as well.
Yeah. And also too, like your lifestyle can creep up very quickly, right? So
Mhm.
yes, please, you're getting that beautiful paycheck that you worked very hard for. Enjoy it. But like you can set a time limit on how long you're enjoying it and just spending, and you don't have to get used to that level. And it doesn't mean that you have to go back to living like you were a resident. You don't have to like push the limit that much,
Mhm.
unless you want to. And if you want to, great, that's beautiful. But
Mhm.
it can just mean that you're choosing to, yes, get a bigger apartment or live a little bit nicer or spend money on that extra rare, fantastic, organic, whatever it might be. But it also might mean that, hey, okay, I'm going to get a nicer apartment, but maybe I don't need a 2 bedroom. Maybe I'm okay with 1 bedroom, or maybe I'm going to live in a 2 bedroom, really nice place, but I'm going to live with my best friend, or I'm going to live with my spouse or partner or whatnot. Or I'm going to go snowboarding a ton this season, but I may not travel as much in the summer. So
Yeah, like
kind
that.
of, yeah, creating a level of balance that allows you to enjoy your money because you should, but also allows you to feel like you can pay down your debt.
Yeah. Yep. Could not agree more. So for the sake of time, I have two more great questions if you're still doing okay. But I'm gonna let you pick which one you want to answer.
Ooh,
and then
okay.
we can leave like a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So in our noisy world with news, social media, everything, how could a physician essentially block out the noise and stay in their lane? Or how to have a financially vulnerable conversation with a loved one? Both pretty
Whoa.
good. Both, I mean, you could.
This
I'll
is
leave it up
good.
to you.
Mm.
And then we'll just have to have another podcast to answer the second question.
Yeah, seriously. I know social media comparison is such a big deal, but I'm gonna talk about vulnerable conversations and vulnerable communication. And I'm
Love it.
choosing that question because I feel like people do not talk about money enough.
Mhm.
And in your question lies the answer. It is vulnerability. It is hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to put yourself out there. But similar to therapy and to cleaning out your closet and to being insightful to yourself,
Full circle.
doing right, exactly, always doing it is gonna feel so hard. And you're gonna feel like, I don't want to. Is this important? Maybe we don't have to talk about it. But so many people suffer in silence, and so many people just feel so awful about their money. And it doesn't matter if you are making $600,000 or making $20,000. You can feel awful about your money either way.
Mhm.
And having somebody else that you can talk to and share some of those concerns or stressors or anxieties or sadness or feelings of shame, guilt, you name it, having somebody else to be there who can hear you and wants you to win and wants and is able to support you emotionally is so incredibly important on these journeys, right? On your financial journey and your life, it's just important to feel like you have somebody who is in your corner, and you do have to be vulnerable to get there, right? You do have to have a harder conversation with your family to just be like, "Hey, I'm okay, but like I'm feeling crushed by my dad. I'm feeling crushed by the the financial situation I put myself into to become a doctor."
Mhm.
And and that you're not alone, right? So not just your family, but your colleagues, right? Some of your friends or your friends from medical school, given their own financial situation, but having the conversation about like, hey, this just feels really hard. And sometimes I'm sad about it. And what are you doing? And let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
And that can really help people to not feel so alone and feel so bad.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is awesome, awesome wisdom. And I know myself, like I felt it too. Like no doubt about it. And I've held it inside before too, kind of, the entrepreneur roller coaster that we go on, right? There's ups
Holy
and there's
moly.
downs, and you're in
Mhm.
the valley of death for a while, sometimes I call it.
Yeah.
You can see the light way out in the distance,
And
right?
hoping, and you're like, the potential, I know it's gonna work. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's just overall human experience, and we all go through it, and know that there are people there to help. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, how can a listener learn more, find you, follow you, whatever it might be?
Sure. So I am on Instagram, and my handle is Asia, AJAE therapy. I'm on LinkedIn and on my website as well, asiaevanscounseling.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. And last fun question. What are you doing for Halloween? Are you dressing up?
I am dressing up. I am making my kids' costumes, which is a big deal for me. I'm very excited.
Ooh,
But I am lucky that my road that and my neighbors, they like to block off the street, and we have kind of like a block party and
fun.
have food, and the kids are trick-or-treating, and we all hang out, which is awesome. And I think my friends actually might come to visit. So yeah, I'll
Love
be
that.
doing that.
Is your costume a surprise, or can you
No,
share?
so I am going to be, me and my husband are going to be chefs. So we are
Oh,
chefs,
okay.
and our kids are going to be spaghetti and meatballs and mac and cheese.
That is awesome. That is going to be adorable.
Yeah,
Please share a photo with me.
will do. Yeah, I I have all the things for the making of their costume. I need to do that.
That's so fun. So fun. Well, thank you so much. Seriously, that was awesome. I can't wait to share this and get it out in the world. I'm very grateful our paths cross. It's always so cool to have conversations with like-minded people and talk about things that matter with people who care and want to listen is something that I, love in life. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Ah, absolutely, James. This is such a pleasure. And thank you for the work that you're doing and creating space for people to really be honest and insightful and just think about, some of the harder parts about money.